and flames, triumphant over tooth and claw, he smote his foes with iron paw. Bane of vermin, strong and bold, Lord of badgers, long foretold, the forge is cold, the blacksmith gone. He sleeps in salamander strong. He stood an ancient oaken tree, unshakable by storm or sea. The woodland rested in his shade.
Good evening. That was very dramatic. I love it. So it's so nice to see all of you here tonight, my class, and quite a few others. So thank you for coming. I am so pleased to be able to introduce to you my friend Chris Skaggs this evening. Chris is the founder and chief operating officer of Soma Games, which is located just northwest of here in Newburgh. And he and his team create a number of different gaming experiences, like the Lost Legends of Redwall and the Wing Feather Saga. I'm sure some of you have heard of those. Chris is an Intel Black Belt recipient, and he's also the founder and executive director of an organization called Imladris, which is an organization specifically for game developers who are Christian. And my husband and I actually had an opportunity this past summer to go to Silverton, where they were having their annual event, and it was just such an incredible experience to be able to hear their stories and their testimonies of game developers, but there are also gamers there too, and so it was just such a fantastic community. Last week, actually, Chris was featured in Christianity Today, an article about Christian storytellers in the gaming world, and this is what he said. The huge thing Christians need to get is that gaming isn't just a toy for kids. It's remarkably social. That component is reshaping everything. So Chris, thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about this reshaping. Could you guys help me welcome Chris to the stage?
All right. Hey, thank you so much for having me, Corban University, Professor Dobson. Thank you so much. I don't often get a chance to kind of talk to humans. Usually it's behind the computer, and so that's fun too. But it's not like being in presence. So really, thank you for that opportunity to talk. I have plenty, I think, of time, so there'll be time for some Q&A. And I think for folks who are here around gaming, that often becomes a place where, as a category, tell me if I'm way off here, you may have found some friction in the church context who might have told you that games are from the devil. Right? So something like this has happened for lots of us. And even if they don't say that out loud, there's a notion that, and I think that Mark Driscoll got famous for saying this, even if it's not sin, it's just stupid. So let me be here to say, like, I, for one, have felt that I got called into this, and for lack of a better word, and you can read it on our website, this was a supernatural calling for me. It was something where God sort of said, "Thou wilt now make games for my name," at which point I was completely confused. I thought it was a stupid idea, but the Lord can be persistent. So that's kind of where I wound up now starting that company in 2005, and our first game came out on the iPhone 3 in 2008, 9, so it was in January 2009, and we've been doing that ever since. The thing about that is, like, where gaming was when we started was still at this place where culturally people saw it as a toy, people saw it as a thing for kids, and when I went to the first event of the Christian Game Developers Conference at that point, it was quite literally a dozen people in a church basement. That's all it was. Now, I probably don't have to tell you, but there are plenty of folks who do not know that gaming is now, by a long shot, the biggest entertainment medium that the world has ever seen, in terms of hours spent, in terms of dollars spent, in terms of jobs, in terms of everything. So let me cast a vision for you right now, which is to say that, like it or not, for me, I like it, Gaming will be the Hollywood of tomorrow, which is to say that it will be the most culturally influencing medium that the world has ever seen. Now let me tell you another story. Let me go back 100 years to the 30s. This is the same situation where Hollywood found itself in the 30s. And what the word was back then was movies were just, they were sort of like maturing from becoming a craft into an art form. People were starting to see them all over the place. There was the cinema, and they're like movie theaters was kind of a new thing. We now had talkies, and so there was color, there was sound. So it was a very different, it went from being like super niche-y to being mainstream. Now the church at that point, I mean broadly the American church, looked at Hollywood and they said, ew, those people are weird, and they take drugs, and they're probably gay, and they do weird things, and we don't want any part of that. So the church, in the middle of its temperance movement, in the middle of its holiness movement, really pulled away from Hollywood, like specifically from Hollywood, and then abandoned it. And I want to be really clear, like when you hear Christians talk today about how Hollywood doesn't respect our values, it's our fault. We are the ones who absolutely moved away from that medium. We are the ones who absolutely judged those people. And so we did not have a voice at the table because we left the table. So now here it is, like, you know, people say, like, how come they don't reflect our values? How come they don't know what we talk about? It's because we left them. And Hollywood isn't especially evil. They are just literally uninfluenced by the church, which was a huge, stupid mistake. Because for anyone who plays Civilization, like the Sid Meier Civilization, you know that Hollywood is literally one of the wonders of the world. It is a winning condition. And what Hollywood does in that game is it means that your culture, in the game context, spreads throughout the world, and it's no longer bounded by your borders. The way that Hollywood, which is to say movies and TV and all of that stuff, the whole world sees what America, frankly, you know, Los Angeles, and then a little bit more like what they project to the world. They think that's the real world. They think that's what it always like is America, which for us, we're like, well, that's ridiculous. It's not like that. But in Taiwan or in the Congo, like, that's what they get. And so that has become the story that the whole world has been told, and nothing in the world has ever been like it. Gaming will be war. Gaming is already so much more money. Closing up, last I looked, it was like $350 billion a year. That's a B, an enormous thing. If you take all of the movies on your phone, all of the music, all of the sports, you put them all together, gaming is more than those combined times 3. And that's just this year. So it is an enormous frickin' market. And that's not just dollars, because it's not about dollars, it's about influence. All of those dollars represent eyeballs. Eyeballs are attention, they're thought leaderships. This is the way that we start to understand the world. Like, what is the story being told in the world? And I don't just mean the United States, I mean the whole world. What is that story being told? And so for you, you're at a Christian university, you're here, you're storytellers of one kind or another, you're making art of one kind or another. What is the story that you're going to tell? What are those people? Because when we all go to art, like when we go to a book, we go to a movie, when we go to a game, what we're looking for, what we're starving for is meaning. Like the great destruction of the modern age has been the lifting up of data at the cost of meaning. And when we go to a store, when we go to art, what we're looking for is meaning. We're looking for the interpretation of the crazy, bonkers, weird world that we live in. And I don't know about you, but it's just got more and more weird ever since, like, especially since the COVID. I just said it this morning, like, since March 2020, none of us have had a normal week. Now, if you're reasonably young, you're at college, you're like, well, that's, you know, a fair chunk of my life. If you're not that, if you're like me, if you're like, well, I won't say, some of the other, like, no hairs over here, like, it's so weird. You're like, the world is bonkers, and it's never been like this. But it's all because of story. That's what I want to talk to you about. I'm happy, and I will talk for days about gaming. But today, I think especially for you, what I think the Lord wants me to talk to you about is something deeper. And that's about story. So I have this thing that I'm calling the games, the grind, and the gospel, the journey we must take. Okay. So a little bit about me, just a really quick, you know, as Professor Dobson said, I'm in Newburgh. I have this game company, and we've been doing it for 20 years. And then we just started this fellowship of Christian game developers, which is named Imladris, thank you, sir, which is an Elvish word because peak nerd is what we're going for. Imladris is the Elvish name for Rivendell. And so that is Elrond's house. And it is known as a place where everybody's welcome. and you've got the gardener who's sitting next to the king of Gondor, and they both have a stake in the fate of the world. And isn't that a picture of the kingdom of Christ, right? There is no Jew, nor Greek, nor male, no female, no slave, no free. We are all here together on this boat called life, and we have to understand how we live. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story, and I'm going to ask you, if you can, just read this with me because it's important in the words. Once upon a time, there lived a sea lion who had lost the sea. He lived in a country known as the Barren Lands, high on a plateau far from any coast. It was a place so dry and dusty that it could only be called the desert. A kind of coarse grass grew in the patches here and there, and a few trees were scattered across the horizon, but mostly it was dust. And sometimes the wind, which together made one very thirsty. But of course, it must seem strange to you that such a beautiful creature should wind up in a desert at all. He was, mind you, a sea lion, but things like this do happen. How the sea lion came to the Barren Lands, no one could remember. It all seemed so very long ago, so long, in fact, it appeared as though he had always been there. Not that he belonged to such an arid place. How could that be? He was, after all, a sea lion. But as you know, once you have lived so long in a certain spot, no matter how odd, you come to think of it as home. It is literally like a physical impossibility for me to speak without referring to Lord of the Rings over and over and over again. So I want to share a quote that comes towards the very end of The Return of the King, where Sam says, "I wonder what kind of a story we've fallen into." And we have this in the movie, we have this in the books, but it is perhaps the most important question we can ask ourselves in a moment like this, because you have to know, don't you? See, so often we come into life and what we think, and the way it feels, is it feels like we've come into a movie 20 minutes too late. There seems to be something important going on, like people are like falling in love, there's people dying, there's like wars and rumors of wars, there's all this happening on, but what does any of it mean? And I don't know. I don't know where I fit, I don't know what my lines are, I don't know what my cues are, what is happening? Isn't that how life feels most of the time? And what we would do, just for like a little bit of clarity, just a little bit of context, like remember that thing where you go into the mall? Do they still have malls? Literally, do they have still? There's that little map, right? It's the Mallmanac, and it has the hieroglyph, like you are here. What that's all about is context. It says like this is where you are. JCPenney is over there, Victoria's Secret's over there. It's up to you. But that kind of clarity is something that we are so often missing when we look with the eyes of the world. But when we look with the eyes of our heart, we open up into a whole different kind of life. The scripture says, above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Let me ask you, have any of you guys heard this verse before, if familiar enough? What do you think they mean by the word guard? Like, is it dangerous? Like, I have to, oh my gosh, I keep it in a cage so that it goes anywhere? Because if you grew up on Jeremiah, the heart is desperately wicked, and who can trust it? If that's what you grew up with, then you're damn right. You better guard your heart, because it's going to betray you. Because it's leading to all kinds of evil. It's going to lead into all kinds of sin and regret or whatever else. But maybe that's not what it means, because after all, it is the wellspring of life. That sounds pretty good. Maybe I mean guard it in the same way that I would guard a treasure, that I would guard, a chest full of gems and gold and doubloons, each one of whom has a story to tell, each one of them that has a purpose in why it got into that chest all by itself. Maybe that's what it means. And I'm here to suggest to you that this verse about your heart, especially as storytellers, hold on to this, because it will unlock so much of that crazy, weird story that I was telling you about. Your heart will become the place that walks you through this. Later on, Jeremiah says, stand at the crossroads and ask for God. I will show you the ancient path, says the Lord. There is a way that we can approach God, that we can approach the story, and He will walk us through. And I want to tell you that part of that story is desire. Part of that story, in fact, one of the most important parts of the story, is understanding what are the God-given desires that showed up in your heart alone. The ones that don't show up in anywhere else, that are unique to you. This is the fingerprint of God upon your life. When people talk about your calling, And this is just a definitional question. I want you to understand your calling as that thing that God put on you uniquely that will last through eternity. Which means, by definition, that nothing temporal can possibly hold your calling. No job, no mission work, no school, no marriage, none of that. None of that is possible can contain or it can constrain your calling, but it will never be that because it's bigger than that. That's why your calling is partly, and I'm using this word calling with desire, is part of this. When we are willing, because remember, talk about Jeremiah's verse, right? The heart is desperately wicked. But also remember Ezekiel, who says later, like, I will take that heart of stone out of you, and I will give you a heart of flesh. And so everyone here who has been regenerated in the fullness of Christ, that is a real thing. That's not just like happy religious talk. Once that new heart is in you, it is a good heart. And you can hear this in the way that Jesus talks about it, because he talks about, like, out of the good heart, the wise man brings forth jewels and treasures from some old, some new. He talks about the good heart, and he must lean into your heart. He would never do that if your heart was so corrupted that it couldn't be trusted. So hang on to this question. And you're going to see where this is all going with story. Desire will tell you about your design, what you were made for. C.S. Lewis talks about this idea that if you sense things in your heart that have no earthly reason, that have no like answer or fulfillment, then it suggests that those desires were made for something other than the earth. It suggests way deep down, like maybe, like the sea lion, you were made for the sea, but you find yourself in the desert. That maybe there's something that's so profound, so mysterious, so close that it feels too much to whisper about it. The desire in your heart will lead you home. And not only that, but it will fulfill the purpose that you're here to write stories. It'll fulfill this. Your desire will reveal design, and that design will reveal your destiny if you let it. So going back to Sam, what sort of a story have we fallen into? So let me ask you, and I'm going to come back to this, but I want you to think about it, especially if you've taken notes or something. What is the story that you are telling about your life right now? Like, what is it about? Is it a political story? Is it a economic story? Is it just, I haven't even thought about my story because I'm just trying to get through college for pity's sake, like when do I get my chapel credit? What is a story you're telling? And we're going to come back to that. So the role of your heart and your desire will help you. So here is the secret that you have to understand, is that, did it go away? Hold on, it skipped it. Desire is one of the most powerful forces you will ever feel. And this shouldn't be a secret. We just have to wake up to where the study of history, for example, is just the story of people. It's just a story that when, kings and queens and generals and prisoners, they're just people who fall in love, who have kids, who have desires. They just, happen to have armies and nuclear weapons. But desire is the most human thing that we all have, and it will bring us into the heart of how all of the world works. But as Christians, we are often taught that it is our desires that we're most afraid of. We can get told sort of subtly or sometimes like right up front that is those things that we love, that those are probably, remember I said, like of the devil, that they're stupid, that they're not productive. It is often that for some people they don't know, and especially if you're an artist, like I've seen too many artists who tried to bring their craft of one kind or another. Maybe you're a musician, maybe you're a writer, maybe you're a programmer. But they bring their gift to the church they don't know what to do with it. And so they feel like they don't belong there. And so I've had so many people tell me they felt they had to choose. I can either follow my art, which is deep in me, which is powerful in me. I can do this, or I can be with Christ, but I can't find a way to do both. That is a tragedy. And I think this is kind of like my life's work right now, is trying to make sure that bridge gets built back between the church and the arts. But that's for another story. But I just want to say, because our passions, because our desires, because those motives, because they can go so wrong, and they can, but we can't kill our heart to save it. We can't bury our gifts, we can't bury our stories just because it might be a little bit risky, because risk is where the fun is. I'm going to give you a couple quotes. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Praise the Lord, O my soul, who satisfies your desires with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. To open your hand and satisfy the desires of every living thing. If you've ever read the Psalms, David feels like he's high all the time. Like he goes from like the depths of despair to like manic joy, all within a couple of chapters. Like he is all over the place. And David, like the songbook of life, suggests that the way that God made us was to explore the entire realm of human emotion, all of it. The highs, the lows, the fun, the sadness, that part of that is what we are expected to do. And again, as storytellers, as writers, as players, I just want to encourage you, like, find your heart and keep it. Do not let that go away, because the world is not your home. Just like the sea lion, I want you to think about this. You may have heard this in church before, but this world is not your home. For a moment, I want you to think, like, what does that really mean? And for anyone who, for example, like maybe is not from how far you want to go, it's not from Salem, it's not from Oregon, it's not from the United States, how does it feel to be away? And now just multiply that, like this is not where you were made for. This is not your home. And there's got to be something powerful at the same time that it's sad, at the same time that you're missing something, at the same time that you long for something bigger. What would it mean to you to really recognize that this world is not where you belong? One of the reasons, in fact, probably the reason that I love Lord of the Rings so much is because it was the first time in my life that I found myself feeling homesick for a place that I'd never been, that didn't exist. And I could not get past this aching in my heart for the friggin' Shire. Like I was losing my mind as a teenager, like what is happening? And I didn't have words for it back then. I didn't know what was going on in me, but I know now that that was the eternity written on my heart. That was the thing that Proverbs say that is in all of us. And when we find it, when we sniff the breeze of heaven, we don't know what it's doing, we don't know where it's from, but we know that it's home. That's what Lord of the Rings did for me. Probably most of you have something like that. Some place where some piece of art, a painting, a song, a book, or it just touched you in a way that you could never replicate, and you're not even sure that you want to because it's beautiful and it hurts at the same time. That's life and life to the full. That's John 10:10. That's what Jesus talks about we were made for, is that fullness of expression, that fullness of life. That's the thing that brings all of us to you storytellers that we have to bring to the world. This world is not your home. Christopher Fry says, and this guy's not a believer, the inescapable dramatic situation for all of us is that we have no idea what our situation is. We may be mortal, what then? But we may be immortal, what then? We are plunged into an existence fantastic to the point of nightmare. And however hard we rationalize, or however firm our religious faith, however closely we dog the heels of science or wheel among the stars of mysticism, we cannot really make head or tail of it. There was a time many years back, if you will, read with me, when the sea lion knew that he was lost. And in those days, he would stop every traveler he met to see if he might help him find his way back to the sea. But no one seemed to know the way. On he searched, but never finding. After years without success, the sea lion took refuge beneath a solitary tree beside a very small water hole. The tree provided refuge from the burning rays of the sun, which was very fierce in that place. And the water hole, though small and muddy, was wet in its own way. And here he settled down and got on as best he could. The tragedy of life is not that it's hard. It's not that people die. It's not that there's wars. It's not that there's disease. The tragedy of life is that we've got used to it. That we accept it. That we look at the beautiful, magical, fantastic thing that was created in God's image. We see its desecration. We see its brokenness. But we say that's just life. Death, poverty, disease, it's just part of it. We have gotten used to the mud hole, and we were made for the sea. Don't lose the sea is the secret. Don't forget the sea. Simone Weil, the danger is not lest the soul should doubt whether there is any bread, but lest by a lie that it should persuade itself that it is not hungry. Chesterton says, we have come to the wrong star. That is what makes life at once so splendid and so strange. The true happiness is that we don't fit, that we have come from somewhere else and we have lost our way. The world longs for you. It needs you to tell about the sea. It needs story to make sense of the crazy. And when we get used to it, when we just lean in to what we see here, that is the way that Christians lose their saltiness. That is the way that Christians lose their light, is when we just lean in and we accept the junk and the crap and the sin and the poverty and the hatred and the pain. When we just accept that and we just roll with it, we just try to get by. Can I just please get my 401k vested? That is not the life of Christ, and it is not your life as a storyteller, because you have a different calling. You, especially as the ministers of story, have a special role in this thing, which is that you cannot lose the point. You cannot fail to tell the story because the world doesn't know where else it will go. I have one last chapter for the sea lion, and we're going to see what happens to him, if you will. Once upon a time, there lived a sea lion who had lost the sea. Had you journeyed in those days through the barren lands, you might have seen the sea lion for yourself. Quite often in the evening, he would go and sit upon his favorite rock, a very large boulder, which lifted him off the burning sand and allowed him a view of the entire country. There he would remain for hours into the night, silhouetted against the sky, and on the best nights, when the wind shifted to the east, a faint smell of salt air would come to him on the breeze. Then he would close his eyes and imagine himself once more at the sea. When he lay himself down to sleep, he would dream of a vast, deep ocean, twisting and turning, diving and twirling. He would swim and swim and swim. And when he woke, he thought he heard the sound of breakers. The sea was calling to him. This is a famous saying: if you wish to build a ship, do not divide the men into the teams and send them into the world to cut wood, but instead teach them to long for the vast and endless sea, like the sea lion. You have to understand that as storytellers, as truth tellers, the truth is never about earth. The truth that you are called to elucidate, that you're called to share, is always about something more. It's always reaching beyond the material and the temporal. It's always reaching into the heavenly and the eternal, which is what we were made for, where heaven and earth overlapped in Eden. Every story has to be reflected back to that's what the truth really is. And let me tell you, the stories is everything. You'll remember what Jesus calls Satan is the liar, among other things. Our world is always a battle of narratives. It is always a battle for the truth. Yes, the truth sets you free, but not just the truth. It's more than just that. You might have ever heard of the term of the movers and the shakers. It comes from this poem. We, which is you are the music makers. You are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and setting by desolate streams. World losers and world forsakers, of whom the pale moon gleams, we are the movers and the shakers of the world forever, it seems. Do you see yourself in this role as a storyteller? And like, forgive me for anyone here who's like, I just need the credit. Like, forgive me if that's not where you are. But if you are this person who writes, who draws, who plays, who sings, who brings beauty into the world, for most of human history, beauty was understood as like an event in which truth became manifest. Beauty was seen as one of the three transcendentals, the good, the beautiful, and the true, and that beauty was this way in which the deeper, fundamental, capital T truth came into existence for you to perceive with your senses. And I don't only mean like pretty and cute. I don't just mean that. I mean the thing that's a deeper sense of beauty, the thing that gives you a sense of like what's really there, and you realize that you've seen behind the curtain. That's what O'Shaughnessy's talking about. But this world has lost its story. This world right now, if you look around, all the things that make this world crazy right now is that they don't know what the story is. Going back to what I said earlier, like we feel like we come into a movie 20 minutes too late. Everyone in the world feels that right now. And there is this scrambling for the war of the narratives. What's really happening? Who's in charge? Who should be in charge? Who's good? Who's bad? What's righteous? What's evil? It's all about the narrative. Jesus makes it super clear that the devil is a liar and the father of lies, that it is his native tongue, which means that we are obliged as Christians to discern the truth and to share it. But I went back, it's not just the facts, right? Because I think we all recognize that two people can press their mandibles together in a mutually assured exchange of bodily fluids, and that's a thing that can happen. But that's not what a kiss is. I could read you the phone book right now, and every word in it would be true, and it would be stupid. You see, it's not just about the facts. The facts are not enough. That's what I was saying earlier. It's like we have traded data for meaning. Meaning is everything. And it is almost never in a volume of information. It is always in the subtlety of a heart. It is always in the eternity of an eye. How we see things, how we tell things, that is your role as storytellers. So I go back to something I asked earlier. What is the story you are telling yourself? And what's the story that the world is telling you? And think about this, chew on this, because it matters. Who is the good guy in your story? Who is the bad guy? Where is it all going? Are you telling yourself a story about gender, about politics, about nation states? Are you telling a story about my career and my likes and shares? Is that the story that you're telling? Is that the story that the world wants you to tell? Or is that the story that God is telling? Now, I want you to think about this, what story is, because story is the language of the heart. Story is the thing that goes beyond the facts, and it says the things like, think about when Jesus comes to the world and he has to give like the most important sermon, and he has to tell like, this is how it's going to go, people. I'm going to explain everything. And instead of telling us anything, he starts talking about fig trees. Oh yeah, there's this fig tree and a guy, and and then the gardener says, or rather the master says, like, that fig tree is a piece of junk, go cut it down. And the gardener says, like, no, let's give it another year. I'll fertilize it a little bit, and we'll see what happens. And if it doesn't give fruit in a year, then we'll cut it down. And then he's like, and I'm gone. And then Jesus leaves. And he leaves that kind of thing with you to figure it out. Or another thing is like, hey, there's this manager at a guy, he's going to get fired because he's your schmuck. And he realizes, like, I can't work because my hands are too soft. So I'm going to go to all of my clients. I'm going to, like, write down their bills, and that'll be awesome. So I'll have a job. And again, Jesus leaves. These are the kinds of things that Jesus does all the friggin' time. Now, if you've ever been in this construct, in fact, I know people in this room who've had this thing. I was like, you shouldn't tell fiction because fictions are lies. Jesus told fiction all the time. Every parable he did was fake. And it was on purpose to trick you. Did you notice this? Watch closely. Because Jesus says, when they ask him, like, why do you do parables, man? It's weird. And he says, in order so that some people don't get it. You ever think about that? Jesus tells fiction in order to confuse people. Welcome to truth. Here's what story does, though. What story does, what a parable does, is it gets underneath all of our facts. It gets underneath all of our expectations, all of our presuppositions. Instead, it goes down to something that's much deeper, that's more eternal, and can speak below all of that junk that we put up to keep the truth out, which is to say, all of the lies and strongholds and expectations that the enemy puts before us to reinterpret our world. Papa Dallas Willard, in case you don't know, you should know Dallas Willard. Papa Dallas likes to say that the primary battlefield is all in our minds. The primary battlefield of the enemy is our minds. So the story that you're telling yourself, the story that the world is telling you, matters a lot. And you should not be an open door, just like letting anything in all the time. Because remember I said like the phone book is true. Like I can tell you all the facts, the addresses, the phone numbers, the probably the LLCs, all that is in there and it's true. But do you ever read the Bible like that? Like a phone book? Like it's just this sort of like thing of data, there's no story. Have you lost the story when you read the Bible? Or do you see the incredible, crazy drama that it is? And I don't just mean that there was a guy who died on a cross and now you're forgiven. Please don't break anything until he comes back. I don't mean that story. I mean the one that talks about like when there was when the time before time, the golden age, when there was just the Trinity. And this is the time before there was light, before there was sun, and yet at the very foundation of all of reality is love, is a relationship. Not, by the way, a cold and distant father on a throne far, far above, not that. Not just a suffering servant, on the cross ready to die, but rather a family, an intimate relationship, and mutual deference. That is actually the heart of all reality. There was that, and then one day, that incredible manifestation of love decided, I want more. You know what I really want? I want kids. And he makes a world full of angelic beings of immense power and majesty. I don't know if you ever read about the angels in the Bible, but they are not fat little kids with wings who look about as dangerous as a kindergartner. Like the angels in the Bible are immense, crazy things. I know right now there's the whole like biblical angel, kind of thing, biblically accurate angel pictures. I get that. And you imagine like the thing that almost everybody says when they meet an angel is like, I'm gonna die. One of the first things most angels have to say is, it's okay, I'm not here to kill you. And I want you to think about a couple things. This is before the devil. This is before sin. This is before anything has gone wrong. God decides to make the angels with weapons. What was he thinking? To give them swords? To give them shields and chariots? Like, what was going on in his mind about these creatures? Because I think if you go down to a bookstore and you see a book with, like one of them's got a gold retriever in coveralls and he's got like a little guard trowel in his hand, like that's one kind of book. And there's another kind of book where it's like helicopters and Navy SEALs and explosions. That's a different kind of book. And you can just see it by the cover. And so when God is first populating his stage with warriors, it's got to tell you something. It's got to tell you something that you may have missed. And when that's all done and there's all of this incredible majesty, I want to point something out to you, is that Satan fell then. We did not invent sin. I don't know what you've been told, but we didn't invent it. The rebellion of Satan happened before we were ever on the scene, and you know that because when God gets around to making the earth, right now we're at Genesis 1, and if you ever thought Genesis 1 was in the beginning, I want you to think about John 1. John 1:1 says, in the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was God, and God was the Word. That was the beginning. Genesis 1 is just our beginning, which is like Act 3 in the story. By the time we get to Act 3, like there's already been rebellion in heaven. There's already been trouble. And that's at this, and we know this because Satan has been condemned to this earth. He's stuck here, and he's already in the Garden of Eden to tempt people. He's already broken. So when Eve comes around, keep in mind what happens is after that kind of rebellion, after that kind of civil war has happened in heaven, God wants to start again. And now we come onto the scene, and he imbues humanity with a majesty and a glory that no one has ever even considered. This is, we are made of mud, we are made of muck, we are made of schmucks, and he breathes his glory into our nostrils, and that is who you were meant to be. God's image on earth, and the avatar of the living God in a way that nothing had ever seen. nothing had ever heard of, that was unimaginable at that time. And you weren't just called to, like, I don't know if you read of any of the other old ancient Near Eastern myths, but what Babylon and Assyria and all their myths would say is like that humans were created to serve the gods. We were manual labor for Ishtar and for Baal and for all those guys. But for our God, he's like, I just love these guys. I love these guys. And he gives us a majesty and a dignity that David in the Psalms is saying, like, what is man that you consider us? We are just made a little bit lower than the angels, and yet you lift us with glory and honor. So he's like, think about that's who you are. I said, like, you weren't made for this world. You weren't made for this crap either. You were made as a king or a queen in a heavenly stage. That's a different kind of a story, isn't it? And I want you to think about what God says as he makes creation. It's good, it's good, it's good. He makes people. Well, that's really, really good. And I should say, ladies, he makes man. He says that's really good, but not good enough. The first time God says something's not good, this is before the fall. The first time he says something's not good, it's like there's no ladies. Man shouldn't be alone. I think that's a wild, wild thought. That for him it's like just so close, but you know what? We need something more. He makes you ladies. It's like almost like the crown of creation, the last pièce de résistance. I have no idea if that's really French, but that's how it was told me. That's a different kind of a story, I think, than most of us have been told. By the time we finally get into Genesis, which falls so fast, and as Milton says, like, our glory faded so soon, then we were cast into this drama of him, like, from the moment we fell, to be like, but I'm going to fix it. And we get to this whole story that you read from Genesis 1 to Revelation 20. It's all about fixing it. But there's still so much more. There's still so much more into Revelation about the palingenesia, like the renewal of all things. I don't know if you've ever thought about, like, every tear that you've ever shed, every tear that the world has ever shed, he knows about it, he catches it, and it will be redeemed. The word says that Christ's coming and the renewal of all things should be the anchors of our soul, but most of us do not even know that that's part of the story. There is a huge chapter 4 coming that is all about renewal and restoration, where everything that the devil has done will be undone. That's the story that the world needs to hear. That's the story that the world has lost, and it is in your hands. You see this when Jesus talks in Matthew about, we played the pipe for you, you didn't dance. We sang a dirge, you didn't sing. He's talking to a generation who has so lost their ability to see what's right before them. They can't engage emotionally, thoughtfully, with heart. The heart that is their wellspring of life. They can't engage with the world around them. This is what he's talking about. I mentioned story is the language of the heart. And that's what we have to do this. So let me start to wrap this up. Yes, I make video games. I didn't mean to skip over that. But what I want to say about video games is another art form, and I do believe it will be the Hollywood of the next 100 years. But in the end, it's got to be about story. It's not, frankly, about game mechanics. It's not about whether or not it's the graphics or it's the GPU. It's not about any of that. It's still always going to be about story, because that is the eternal thing. And so if you want to be a player or you want to be a maker, we have to hold on to this notion, because this is what the world needs so much. The story of God has always been and always will be the story of the world. That is our story. So when Sam asks, I wonder what kind of story we've fallen into, ask yourself, what's the story you believe? What's the story that you've been told? What's the story that the world wants you to believe? I think I will wrap that up. So with that, I want to just inspire you, like, you are the music makers, you are the dreamers of dreams. And the world desperately needs to find its story, and I hope that you will help. All right, with that, I hope that was okay. I was asked to leave a little bit of time, and I have. If there's questions or comments, raw vegetables, whatever you feel is necessary. But in order, I think for that, I've decided to wear a helmet just to protect myself. So, what's coming next? Like, if there are any questions, how can I help? I am prepared now and duly defended. Yes, sir.
Did you write the story about the sea lion? Because that's like just excellent.
I wish that I did. John Eldridge wrote that story, and it's in his book, The Journey of Desire. Yeah, but it's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a hand back there.
What was your favorite video game growing up?
Yeah, so there were 3 games growing up that made a huge difference to me. One of them was Myst, and so I don't know if you remember that game, but that absolutely rocked my world. And it was all about the story and the mystery and like all the things going on in that. So Myst was a huge influence. And then kind of like counter to that was one called the Adventure Construction Set, which was actually a tool building game. It was one of Electronic Arts' first games, but then it let me make stories. And so my buddies and I, we would use that tool and we would make like Boot Hill and fantasy and sci-fi games, and we'd share them back and forth with each other, but we were all practicing that, and everything about that was stories because there really wasn't much graphics. And those 2 things together were like very, very foundational for me. You go a little bit forward, and it's always been the story games that matter for me. Those are the games that Soma likes to make, which is to say, I make them because I get to make those decisions, and that's super fun. So yeah. Yes, sir.
All right, it's got a few. Step 1, stats for games equal New Hollywood. Do you have any like sources, references, things, or that's just a thing that you're positive that you think is going to happen?
No, I've got tons of stats. I guess I didn't come armed with them, but I can tell you that if you look in just the industry, if you look, for example, like how big is the game industry, these are very popular figures, and they change every year. And what you'll see is that even the best analysts who are always kind of like bullish on games almost always undergauge how fast it's growing, partly because as games go into other countries, you wind up going from like the American market to the global market, and that's just orders of magnitude bigger. It's huge.
And then my other question, so you talked about the Christian scene basically being late to Hollywood and having kowtowed it for a while until we realized, oh, hey, that's a really good thing. When I was growing up, I'm not that old, but I'm out of college, so a little bit older than these people. All of the Christian media, to be blunt, sucked. It was really bad. The stories were corny. And how are you, as someone who's trying to both be in this industry but also be Christian, is that something you see? Is that something you're trying to combat? I like the quote you said where Jesus said, not made so people, or like, Jesus told stories so people don't get it. And I feel some of the corny Jesus stories are made so that you can't miss it, which then leads to it being
Yeah.
bad because it's just so ham-fisted that you're left not wanting for anything because it was all spelled out.
Yeah. So first, I agree with you that for the most part, and by that I mean like the most part, Christian media has like absolutely stunk on ice. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Partly is that in the context of the church, you're often given where like if it's not ending with an altar call, then it can't be Christian. And the only people who are funding those are churches, and they don't have any money anyways because they're nonprofits. So they spend a little bit of money on a junky game that then is forced into a template, which obviously makes crappy art. But one of the things that I have come to, part of like my little mission is, however, it really depends on what you mean by Christian art. So for example, I mentioned Civilization, Sid Meier. Sid Meier's a believer, like one of the most successful game makers in the history of gaming. He's a Christian. The people who made Myst, Rand and Robin Miller, also Christians. At the time, the best-selling game ever in history for something like 25 years. And while they weren't making Myst, they were playing worship in Spokane, Washington at their local church. Lance Preeb from Club Penguin, a Christian. And I can go on and on. The founders of EA, Trip Hawkins and Dave Evans, also Christians. So it's actually some of the best game makers in all of history are actually believers, and they've made some of the best games, you just didn't know it. You didn't know that that's what was going on because they didn't lead with a fish, right? They didn't start with a little fish on the label and be like, oh, you have to like my game because my heart's in the right place. Well, no, because it's still crappy art. And so I just want to give you guys permission, if you are ever confronted with that kind of pressure, like, go for good art. Don't worry about putting an altar call in it. Don't try to like sanitize something or give it credit by just sort of like adding an altar call. Don't do that. What we need is really good creatives making really good stuff, because it's not just by Christians for Christians, it's for the world. It's for everyone, and they are discerning people, and so they won't tolerate your crap. And that's just the truth of it. So yes, I think that's a big part. And I find myself often having to give permission to students at Christian universities, like, go make good stuff. And that's really the call. Does that help? Yes?
I just had a question about naming your organization SOMA, because Huxley SOMA had a really negative connotation. What's the reason, and then what's the goal of the name?
Yeah, so Huxley, yes, negative, but also funny, right? Funny in this case. So here's the deal. And this is my experience, take it or leave it. Is like, for me, I felt like the word Soma was something that God told me, this is the name of your company. So for whatever that's worth. But Huxley isn't the only reference. Soma is this really weird word that shows up in a lot of languages and means a lot of different things. Like in Swahili, it means teaching. In Finnish, it means pretty. In Brave New World, it is the opiate of the masses, which is a pretty good description of gaming, by the way. But more importantly, Soma in Greek means body, like the body of Christ. And the meaning, and I didn't mean it to be this way, it's just, I think the one I've embraced the most is on this idea of what we've done with Imladris, which is to draw the body of Christ together around this thing. I think the Huxley reference is just funny, which I acknowledge it, I own it, but it's not the only meaning.
So you said earlier that you think there's more potential in storytelling rather than game mechanics specifically. Did I get that right? Or?
Yes, but let me say it this way, is gaming has become an art form where it used to be a toy. And then the same way, you can take a picture of just your mom, but you can also make art with a camera. And it's the same way. So don't get me wrong, you can still make just arcade games that are just fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's so much more opportunity.
Okay. So what do you think about the potential of using the game mechanics to enhance the story? For example, if the story is telling you, this guy is really bad and really skilled at swordplay or something, and you go up in a boss battle against him, and you can just absolutely cheese him and take him out in 10 seconds, I don't think that really helps communicate the story very well.
So here's what I would suggest. So one is there's a whole conversation about ludonarrative dissonance, when these two things don't match. And that's a good professional conversation. But I think what I would like to share is, if you consider your game mechanics as part of your storytelling. And I'll give you a great example of where someone was doing this poorly, I think, and that's Peter Molyneux in Fable. And so if you've ever played Fable, one of the things you can do is you can talk to anybody in the game, and they'll tell you this person is straight, they're gay, they're bi, whatever. But they tell you that, and then yet you can woo any character regardless of their orientation according to their character profile. So no matter what, I can still have a romantic relationship with any character. Now what's funny about that is Peter Molyneux as a person would never agree to that. So as a person, he would say to be gay, you're gay once and forever and that nothing changes. There's no fluidity about it. And yet his game shows a very different narrative. The game mechanic reflects it's a fundamental story about sexuality, that his own life is at odds with his own game mechanic. This might be more fun or whatever else, but it tells a story, it tells you something. So mechanics are part of the reality that you're preaching. So I'll give you an example on just a more other side. If you ever played a game that just doesn't seem fair, fairness, you sort of feel it in your gut, that's baloney, you can never beat that guy or whatever. Super Meat Boy will do this to you. But if you feel it may be hard, but it's fair. So most of the Souls games are like this. They're hard, but they're fair. You're okay because you fundamentally believe that fairness is cooked into the universe, even if you didn't say that out loud. There's an order to our universe, and we feel it in those game mechanics, but you don't have to, because you could have games that just didn't believe that way, and that also is telling a story, but kind of like a subtext. I can't tell, is that a hand back there or just a scratch? I think it's a scratch. Okay. In that case, thank you so much for having me. I'm just honored to be here. So.